What if I told you the first line of the Bible should really be something more like, "In the beginning, there was a discernment made between what exists and what does not"? And what if I could prove this to you through a thought experiment alone? Let me explain. Suppose you're God at the beginning of creation. Before anything exists, God means nothing. In the time before time, he could only be consciousness. And consciousness doesn't create things, only imagines them. But to a consciousness at the beginning of time, there is no discernment between your imagination and reality. Because there's nothing there yet, you are that reality. At the beginning of time, the only thing that exists is you. So at the beginning of time, the universe realized that nothing existed, and it was that nothing. That God or consciousness or universe or everything was that nothing at the beginning of time. So the only thing that could have happened at the beginning of time was the acknowledgement between what exists and what does not.
Hey, how are you guys? This is a late impromptu little stream I'm going to do here. My wife and a few friends they wanted me to make a TikTok because they were like, there's a ton of talk about the Bible and other philosophy, religion, things like that. You might be really interested. This is super late, so I don't expect a whole lot of people to be here for this. So obviously I've been busy lately, but today we're going to go through and show some of the problems with this guy's interpretations of the Bible. It's actually going to be pretty funny, so stick around if you're in the chat. Good to see you. I'm going to start with one of his videos. He goes through Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, 2, and 3, and just makes a mess. So we're going to go ahead and start with a couple of videos here, and we will break it down. And then I'm going to show you some tools to help you if you're new to translating the Bible. So I believe I will go with this one next.
It's a fact or statistic that seems fake but is real.
What if I told you that in no belief system does heaven actually exist? Let me explain. Firstly, let's take the Judeo-Christian philosophy. As most know, the first line of the Bible is that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Most religious scholars would tell you that this is actually a horrible translation from the original Bible.
So the first claim here is that most religious scholars are going to tell you that the first translation, the first verse, is a terrible translation of the Bible. I disagree with that, of course. I've had some Hebrew scholars on, and I think most of them would probably say something like, it's a pretty good translation. Now, it can be changed, of course. I'm going to go through some of John Walton's work, Lost World of Genesis 1. We'll go through a couple, go through a chapter in his book here in a second. Sorry.
The earliest copies of the Bible are written in Hebrew. And the Hebrew word for create, most religious scholars actually realize is better translated to separate or to discern.
This is not true at all. To separate or discern instead of create, that's just not the case. First of all, if you look at his tabs, he's on Wikipedia and another link to somebody's book, right? And I think that book, if I'm correct, came from a tab off of Wikipedia. But if you look at Wikipedia that he has in his tabs up there, and you look beside the word create, there's a number that corresponds to the bibliography at the bottom of the page, in which you will find Dr. John Walton. And he is the scholar that they used, and he disagrees. This term create, he actually has an entire chapter on it. Let's see, let's see. Proposition 3, create, and he argues that it concerns function. And so we'll say a few things here. Does it mean to discern? This is going to be pretty funny. He says that there are 50 times that the word bara is used in the Old Testament. He gives a chart of the usage of them. He says the verb is broad enough to be included for material or functional activity, and in some cases at least, could be both, right? Then he has the chart with all the usages of the term bara. He also talked about this when he came on my show, how saying that God did the heavens and the earth, bara, just kind of doesn't make sense in English. But I thought I'd read to you here a little bit out of it. He says that comparing it to Egyptian and Akkadian text and others from the ancient Near East, you can conclude that the beginning is a way of talking about the 7-day period rather than a point prior to the 7 days. So in the beginning is just to say that at the beginning of this 7-day period. The first verse does not record a separate act of creation that occurred prior to the 7 days, but in fact, the creation it refers to is recounted in the 7th days. Verse 1 serves as a literary introduction. And then he goes on to explain exactly why. But he concludes by saying, verse 1 can be, the proposal in the chapter can be summarized by the following expanded interpretive translation of verse 1. In the initial period, God created by assigning functions throughout the heavens and the earth, and this is how he did it. So I don't think that taking the word create out and putting in the word discernment is going to be a good translation. But we'll see as we go on just how crazy and random some of this guy's translations are.
The second thing to note is that the heavens and the earth is a merism, a figure of speech, which more literally translates into the form and the formless, or existence and non-existence.
Okay, so there's two things there, right? One is, he says this is a merism. Okay, I want to show you, if I go to Google and type in Genesis 1:1 wiki, okay, now I'm going to share my screen. Tab, Genesis 1:1, share. Okay, you should be able to see this now. Yeah, there we go. Let me make it larger. Okay. Now, what does it say here? This is a merism, a figure of speech, indicating that the two stand not for heaven and earth individually, but everything in the entire cosmos. Okay. Now, knowing that this is on Wiki, let's re-listen to that.
This is an excellent speech, which more literally translates into the form and the earth is a merism, a figure of speech, which more literally translates into the form and the formless, or existence and non-existence, or everything and nothing.
He's going to keep going on with this thing about how heaven is formless and earth is form, okay? And you're going to really see that in the next, and it's just going to hurt him really bad when we get to the second verse, but...
So a better translation for the first line of the Bible is that in the beginning, God discerned between what exists and does not exist. In other words, heaven literally translates to nowhere land.
Wow. Okay, let's move on, because
You're right, it is a translation. Let me explain. In my last video, we talked about how the first line of the Bible isn't what you think it is. This is the first line of the Bible in its original form.
This guy does this a lot to kind of, I guess, get his audience. He always has something like going in the background, like flashing lights or something, and he always like pulls down his glasses and he goes, the Bible's not saying what you think it is. Let me explain. And so people are like all interested on TikTok, but keep in mind, he's just speaking fast, and these are very short videos because TikTok is a very short form. He says the original, the Bible's originally in Hebrew, and he points to this translation.
In Hebrew. Now let's break down what the word for heavens means. You see, the Hebrew word for heaven comes from Sham and Mayim. which literally translates to sky water. But in this context, it really means that which has no form.
Okay, this is just crazy, right? So, like, first of all, he uses throughout his this translating, he keeps using things where he'll say it literally means this, right? But like we can, you know, if you studied any bit of translation, that an etymological fallacy, for example, to try and translate butterfly to mean that it's a fly that's made of butter or something like that, you can't do that because that's one of the etymological fallacies, right? But then he doesn't even take his own literal translation. He says that heavens means formless, okay?
Or the formless. On the other hand, the Hebrew word for earth literally means earth, but not in the planet Earth, in the element earth. In other words, that which has form.
So earth doesn't mean the planet Earth, right? It means the element Earth, which I'm sure the Hebrews knew the earth as the elements, right? But then he takes it further. He's like, oh yeah, which basically means having form. This is going to get so bad here in a second.
So all the first line of the Bible is really saying is that at the beginning of existence, there was a discernment made between the existence of form and the existence of formlessness. So all that is really meant by when you die and you go to heaven, you just simply go from having form to not. And believe me, this is only where the rabbit hole begins.
Ooh.
This is an excellent...
Believe me, this is just where it begins. So his translation, which was pretty bad.
Form. So all the first line of the Bible is really saying is that at the beginning of existence, there was a discernment made between the existence of form and the existence of formlessness.
So at the beginning, there was a discernment made between form and formlessness. All right, keep in mind, he just translated the word earth as that which has form. Okay, now I did a response because I was asked to make a TikTok and somebody sent me this and was like, hey, respond to this, right? I said, okay, so the earth translates to that which has form. Then why in the second verse does it say, and the earth was formless? Like, I mean, it couldn't get much worse for him. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Yeah. So let's share eSword. This is a pretty good free app. It's called eSword. And you can see here Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay. On this plus, you can click and you can see right below it what's the word. Right? So for God, Elohim, created, bara, and then it gives you the different ways you can translate this: to create, to cut down with specifically wood, to select, to feed, a formative process, to choose, to create, that kind of thing, to do, obviously. But if he translates heavens here to mean formless and the earth to mean with form, then this reads the first and second verse: in the beginning, God created the formless and the formed. And the formed was without form. That's how it would literally read if we went with this translation. So it's pretty bad. But it gets worse, of course.
I told you the second line of the Bible isn't what you think it is. Let me explain. Why read the...
Oh, sorry. When he said this one, when he gets to the second verse, keep in mind, I've already done what on TikTok is called a stitch, right? Where you can respond to a video with a video. And since he translated verse 1 that the earth was formed right? Form. And I said, I made a response saying, hey, look, how is the earth translated as form when the second verse says that it's formless? Then he makes this video for verse 2.
The second line of the Bible isn't what you think it is. Let me explain. Why read the King James edition when we can go to the source? The oldest copy of the text is in Hebrew next to its literal translation.
Okay, here's like a couple problems here. He says, why look at the King James version when we can go to the source? First of all, I'm not even a fan of the King James translation. I mean, I think it's an okay translation. There are issues with it, of course, but I prefer the ESV, but it has issues as well. So that's why you need a tool like eSword or Logos or some of these other tools to help you with. But he says, why don't we go to the source, right? The original Hebrew. And then he says, does he say this is the oldest copy of Hebrew? Let's see.
We can go to the source. The oldest copy of the text is in Hebrew next to its literal translation.
Yeah, the oldest copy, right, is in Hebrew next to its literal translation. But look what it says up here. Right below the word Hebrew, it says Masoretic text, which is not the oldest copy of Hebrew. That the oldest copy, well, first of all, the Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls are both older. So, but then he says next to his literal version. What site do you think he's on? That's right, you guessed it. He's on Wikipedia. And so the literal translation on Wikipedia. But let's go on.
But here context is crucial. This is apparently the beginning of time. We can't take the literal translation for face value.
So I love this. He goes, look, why go to the King James Version when you can go to the oldest copy of Hebrew, which isn't the oldest copy. The oldest copy of Hebrew that you can't read beside a literal translation. But wait, you can't translate, even the literal translation doesn't work because this is an abstract event at the beginning of time, right? So let's re-listen to that real quick.
The beginning of time, we can't take the literal translation for face value. First,
yeah, I love that. So why go to the King James when you can go to the literal translation? But wait, the literal translation doesn't work either because this is a really abstract time.
word is easy. It just translates to "and the earth."
Okay, so and the earth.
At the time, earth could represent any physical place. It was
Okay, so then he makes this claim where he says, and the
more synonymous with
oh, wait, sorry, I hate to miss this part. That's so funny. He says this translates to and the earth, literally, right? But at the time, earth could mean any physical place. And then he points at Wikipedia. It doesn't even say that, though. It lists a few things that it could mean. And it doesn't say it could represent any physical place.
translates to "and the earth." At the time, earth.
Look at what it says: country, land, territory. I don't have my reading glasses, but can't. Something, earth, ground, soil. You know, it doesn't say anything about it can represent any physical place.
Could represent any physical place and was more synonymous with existence.
Okay, and then this is where he stretches it even further. Even if it said earth can represent any physical place, then he goes, it's more synonymous with existence. What? How is earth or a physical place synonymous with existence? That's beyond me.
Second word simply "was." Third is difficult to translate, but at the very least we know it's the absence of some quality.
Okay, I love this. It's difficult to translate, right? But he's going to translate it absence. All right, now let's go back.
Was. Third is difficult to.
Okay, look what he's got here. You can see at the end of this third line, there's a comma and a B that he's cutting out on Wikipedia. So I'm just going to show you what that actually says. Let's see if I can share. Okay, so just chapter 1, verse 2. Okay, look right here where what it says beside the line 3. Difficult to translate, but often rendered as formless and void. What's so funny about that is he doesn't want this translated as formless and void, because if verse number 2 is translated formless and void, the earth was formless and void, then his first translation, that the earth was form, literally made 0 sense.
But at the very least, we know it's the absence of some quality.
So instead of formless and void, he just translates it absence, so it doesn't contradict his first translation.
This is pretty agreed upon.
Then I love how he does this. He'll go into like different translations and he'll say, I think it's synonymous with this, but then he'll say
quality. This is pretty agreed upon.
This is pretty agreed upon when it's something that he likes.
The fifth is usually translated to Hubbard because no spatial orientation has been laid out yet. I think a safer synonym would be transcend.
Oh, this is the worst. The fifth is usually translated Hubbard, but since no spatial orientation has been laid out yet, it's like, what? There's no spatial orientation? Then where is the earth and the heavens and God's spirit and all these other things here? If there's no spatial orientation, then where are all the things that this is describing, right? And like, how is transcend a synonym of hovered? Like, imagine you're like trying to explain something and you're like they're like, well, where's the drone at? And you're like, it's transcending over the pool over there. People would just be like, what? It's not even close. What are you talking about? So anyway.
Has been laid out yet. I think a safer synonym would be transcended. Now the sixth is extremely difficult, as it refers to the great deep of the primordial waters of creation, which seems to me like an abstraction of consciousness.
Oh, geez. I mean, can you believe this? This is so bad. Sorry, I haven't been, let's see. So, the face of the deep. Okay, let's see. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see. Window. Here we go. Share this. Okay. The face of the deep. Here's the word deep right here. Okay. So it says usually feminine, the abyss, mass of water, especially deep, the main sea or subterranean water, deep, depth. Okay, so it's going to mean something like deep, water, depth, right? That kind of thing. But what does he translate it as?
Seventh's also abstract, but meaning. Seventh's also like an abstraction of consciousness. Seventh's also abstract, but meaning spirit.
It sounds more to me like an abstraction of consciousness. What? Oh, jeez. I mean, it's just bad. It's so bad. I love how he does this. This is pretty agreed upon.
Like an abstraction of consciousness. Seventh's also abstract, but meaning spirit. The eighth is simply God or gods. Ninth is also contextually synonymous with transcended. Lastly, the 10th is waters, for reasons explained in other videos as non-existence. So we're left with gods. Ninth is also contextually synonymous with transcended.
Okay. So 9 is transcended, right? And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay? It's moved. Fluttered, moved, shaked. Sometimes people, it says fluttered probably because sometimes people say that this is kind of like how God's Spirit is represented by a dove in some passages, like when Christ, the dove, God's Spirit descended like a dove from heaven or whatever. So it'll say fluttered, sometimes, or something like that. Transcend isn't even, it's not even close. It's not even close. But keep in mind, like, he's translating this word as transcend, the word move. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let's see. Let me go back to the video here. Mervant. Yeah, so this is the funniest part is he translates multiple terms in different ways. So like you see the earth was used to mean form in the first verse, right? In the second verse, he's going to change that because it says formless. So he says the earth was absence instead of formless. I don't understand how the earth was absence when it's in the picture here. And then when we get to this part, let's go to this one more time.
Also abstract but meaning spirit. The eighth is simply God or gods. Ninth is also contextually synonymous with trans.
Okay, so keep in mind he's still getting this from Wikipedia. So let's look, because he keeps going to this as a source. But take a look at what it even says. Does it say transcended over the waters? It says translated as hovered or was hovering. Okay. Now, let's hear this last part.
So all that is really meant by when you die and you go to heaven,
Well,
Ascended. Lastly, the tenth is waters. For reasons explained in other videos as not.
okay, the 10th means waters, but as explained in other videos, it means not earth, and earth means existence, so it means not existence. I mean, you kidding me? Like, how bad is this? Like, I can understand you're trying to build an audience, and this guy's got a lot of, as bad as this is, he has like 120 something thousand followers on TikTok and like over 1 million likes. It's just, I mean, it's crazy. Look at this translation right here. Just look at this one word. Translate this to waters, but it means not earth. And earth means existence, so it means not existence. But keep in mind, you see how he translates earth here as existence? What did he translate earth as in the first verse? That which has form, right?
existence. So we're left with this.
Okay, so we're left with this. Oh, probably need to keep up with this. Okay. Let me get a little screenshot of this because I want to, and I want to, in the end, like give his translation in full of the first 3 verses. So I'm going to copy this. Okay. And let's move on to the last one. Like, there's way more to say about that, but like, let's read this. And existence was absence, and darkness transcended consciousness, and spirit, God, transcended non-existence. This is verse 2 of the Bible. Okay. This is supposed to be verse 2 of the Bible. And existence was absence. Was absent. See, this is where it says, and the earth was without form. But because in the first verse he translated it, the earth means form. Anyway, let's move on real quick.
Told you the third line of the Bible isn't what you think it is. Let me explain. As seen in
Keep in mind, I keep critiquing this guy. So he turned off the stitch option for that last video, and so that you can't do it anymore. But for the first one, when I like showed that like his first and second verse translations contradict, he just turned off the stitch option so people can't like stitch his videos. Oh, but it gets worse.
In the King James Edition, then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. But where did they get this translation from, and can we do better? Although the oldest copies of the Bible are said to be written in Aramaic, we can trace its origins back to the Dead Sea Scrolls so far, which were written in Hebrew.
And from there, it seems that biblical scholars have simply literally translated the Hebrew.
Which is a big problem because directly translating Hebrew, especially archaic Hebrew, and the abstract contextualization that is the beginning of time has some problems for interpretation.
I love this. Like this whole song and dance about how the beginning of time was so abstract, you can't even translate it literally. But yet he keeps relying on this Wikipedia translation, which he keeps calling the literal translation says this, and scholars agree. And then he'll go back on it and be like, nobody could know at the beginning of time. Everything was all abstract. So it's hard to translate. So let's hear his speculation.
For instance, does God really say anything?
I mean, at the beginning of time, God had no physical manifestation to have a voice, so he doesn't really say things like you and I do.
In this sense, God doesn't speak, he discerns. Speaking of...
Okay, so when it says, and God said, he just translates that as God discerns.
God, I think that word has been too personified and is more synonymous with existence.
Oh, and guess what? The word for let there be can be anything from become, according to, you have, or even to...
Okay, I don't have my glasses, so I don't think I can read this, but when he's pointing at these things, I don't even think they say what he is implying. Like, when I'm looking at this, I don't see become.
There be can be anything from become, according...
Okay, I see. Sorry, my
to, you have, or even to them, which all revolve around some sense of acknowledgement.
Okay, so then he takes all of what it could be and changes it. He's like, it could be this, that, or that. So I'll just translate it as something different, which he does in almost every verse. He says, that's pretty much synonymous with this other word that's not a synonym.
The rest is pretty undisputable. Hence, we can be sure that a discernment...
He says the rest is undisputable and doesn't even go into it.
...was made. The acknowledgement...
Okay, so I need to screenshot this because this is one of the funniest ones, actually. All right, so let's look at this together after I... Okay, so his translation is, a discernment was made, the acknowledgement of light which became light. Okay, sorry. I want to go back real quick and then we're going to do a review before I take off. I'm not going to be here for too long. I'm going to go back though to the beginning, to the first one, to see what his verse 1 was again.
What if I told you the first line of the Bible should really be something more like, in the beginning, there was a discernment made between what exists and what does not. And what if I could prove this to you?
What? Hold on, wait. That even contradicts his other... Okay. So he translates it that way.
There was a discernment made between what exists and what does not.
Okay. Now listen to his first one again. Now what exists here is the word earth, and what does not is the word heavens. Listen to how he translates the exact same
Fact or
thing.
statistic that seems fake but is real.
What if I told you that a no belief system...
Sorry.
Translation. Let me explain. In my last video, we talked about how the first line of the Bible isn't what you think it is.
This is the first line of the Bible in its original form, in Hebrew. Now let's break down what the word for heavens means. You see, the Hebrew word for heaven comes from Sham and Mayim,
What's up, man?
which literally translates
I
to
just see my comments over there. You're gonna love this, Dr. Falk. Listen to this one real quick if you just got here. Listen to how he translates this.
The word for heaven comes from Sham and Mayim, which literally translates to sky water. But in this context, it really means that which has no form. Or
Okay, this is so funny. I'm actually glad you guys are here. So he translates the heavens and the earth, formless and form.
the formless. On the other hand, the Hebrew word for earth literally means earth, but not in the planet Earth, in the element earth. In other words, that which has form.
Okay, so this is the funniest part is, before you got here, Dr. Falk, I was saying that This guy on TikTok translates the word earth as having form in the first verse. I did a stitch, which is where you can respond to them. And I said, because somebody sent me this and said, hey, can you do a review? And I said, well, the biggest problem with translating it as saying the earth means having form is the next verse says the earth is formless and void. And so then the guy turned off his stitches and like started anew going, oh, well, the second line of the Bible doesn't mean what you think. And he translates the earth as something different in the second verse. So what we have here is
not in the planet Earth, dry water. But in this context, it really means that which has no form, or the formless. On the other hand, the Hebrew word for earth literally means earth, but not in the planet Earth, in the element earth. In other words, that which has form.
So all the first line of the Bible is really saying is that at the beginning of existence, there was a discernment made between the existence of form and the existence of formlessness.
Okay, so so in the beginning, there's discernment made between the existence of the form and formlessness. Dr. Falk, Dr. Falk is an expert in this in the ancient Near East. Well, I'm not sure if Egypt. I guess it's technically part of it. I've heard mixed views on that. And some people say, well, it is, but it's not part of the Levant. And then some. So anyway, if you're interested in coming in, I'll post a link and let you come in. Just let me know if you are, and maybe you can say a thing or two about this. I definitely want to have you back on soon. But so what we got here, he says you can't break down Hebrew words that way. This guy knows nothing about ancient Semitics. That's hilarious. So what we have here, I'm going to go over this. The translation we have in the Bible, for example, is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was ever upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Okay. This guy translates all of that in this way. In the beginning, there was a discernment between the existence of form and formlessness. Okay. The second verse, he says, and existence was absent, and darkness transcended consciousness, and Spirit God transcended non-existence. Okay, and then the third verse, of course, is a discernment was made, the acknowledgement of light, which became light. I'm sorry, it's so hard to like actually read that back and not laugh. Mostly because he keeps, in the first three verses, he keeps translating, like he'll translate earth existence, and then in another verse he'll translate it form, and then he'll translate like in this first verse he says in the beginning discernment between existence, for the existence of form and formless. He uses the word existence where there's not even a word. He just adds it in the word between existence. He just adds both those words in. So it's pretty funny. But this is what you get from TikTok scholarship. The best thing about it is he just acts like he's like his translations are so well thought out, because he. But the funniest thing to me that I kept noticing was when he would say, scholars say that there's this, but I think that's pretty much synonymous with this. my favorite was hovered over the face of the deep. He translated to hovered meant transcended, and deep meant
synonymous with transcended. Lastly, the tense is waters, for reasons explained in other videos as non-existence.
This is my favorite, is how many layers he put on this one word. You know, here's the thing. Butterfly translates literally to butter and fly, okay? And butter is what you use on a sandwich, right? So it can be translated synonymously with food, right? And fly is something that airplanes do. So really, you can break that down to mean airplanes. So it's airplane food, right? So when he smashed a butterfly, he smashed airplane food. It's really crazy how that works. Like, oh, jeez. Hey, what's up, Kiara? Good to see you. That is actually so funny. What's up to Titan? Everybody in the chat, good to see you guys. If you want to come in, anybody, I'd love to have you in. Titan says, should watch Biddy Buddha again. I'm not sure exactly what you are talking about there. You might be referring to where I came on to Oz's show last night, if that's the case, and I kind of was trying to correct them on a couple of issues, I thought. Hey, what's up, Mine Onion? Maybe he's being guided by the Holy Spirit. Have you thought of that? No. So this guy, I don't even think he's a believer. I think he's actually an atheist. It's hard to tell, but these videos were sent to me by a friend, and he was like, he said, this guy sounds kind of convincing, but it also sounds kind of like mystical. What do you think about this? And as soon as I heard him say that the earth should be translated as form, that which has form, and I'm like, well, how does that work with the second verse that says the earth is formless? So I just immediately just thought, okay, this has got to be bad. I did a actually more in-depth breakdown though of each like term. If you didn't see the beginning, I went into Dr. John Walton's book on the in one of the chapters, Proposition 3, he goes into the word bara and create. And this guy said that the word create should be translated as discernment. Just for you guys, Dr. Paul and the other guys out there. But anyway, I haven't had a lot of time lately, but I'm going to be doing more. I'm going to be doing more here in the future. We got a newborn baby, of course. I have been building a pergola, so I've been spending a lot of time doing that. I've been building it by myself, and it's a pretty large task actually, because the way I'm building it with like joinery and whatever. Yeah, and been reading a lot. Dr. Falk, it'd be really you should come back on. I've got a few things I want to talk to you about. I really enjoy Dr. Falk's work because of how clear, the clarity at which he speaks on topics. I find it to be very easy to listen to and also very clear. My biggest problem with a lot of channels is when I watch the people's content. I tell people all the time, you should timestamp your stuff if you're going to have like a 4-hour stream or more, because I can't watch that long and try to find the like relevant information for me, between everybody just saying like, oh, what's going on this week, at your house or whatever, that's fine, but I just don't have enough time. But with Dr. Falk's work, I really find it very clear and to the point and direct. So I appreciate that about your channel. Thank you, Mine Onion. Appreciate that so much. But yeah, Dr. Falk, another thing that I've been thinking about is I've been reading Joel Batten's book on the composition of the Pentateuch, and I find it to be a good book so far. I haven't finished it, of course. I'm still actually relatively toward the beginning, but I have definitely have some. I think it's a good book in the sense that it lays out the arguments, it lays out the history. It has all these things that I think are actually really good components that to tell you the history, to tell you the arguments from both sides and all. But I do find some of his conclusions to be troublesome or misleading in some cases, or problematic in others. Like there's I don't have the books downstairs, or else I'd read straight out of it. But it's, there are passages that says like this is impossible to reconcile, and I can just think of a simple way to reconcile it like immediately, right? And I can just imagine that reconciliation, someone saying, "Oh well, yeah, you can reconcile it that way, but that seems far-fetched." That's fine, but to say it's impossible to reconcile, to me, just that seems like you're stretching a little bit. But anyway, so far I find it like a really interesting book. I also have this book by a really crazy scholar. Let's see if I can stop sharing here. Yeah, this is actually by like a really crazy scholar. And I mean, if you open the book up, there's like definitely like no highlighter been used through this book at all. I mean, I can guarantee you, like, I'm just kidding. So I really spent a lot of time in this book. That's Dr. Falk's book. But no, I have not read Josh Berman's book. I'm gonna have to look that up, because now if you mean Josh Bowen, I've got a couple of his books, but not Josh Berman's book. I guess, is it called The Documentary Hypothesis, or what? Actually, speaking of Bowen, yeah, I've got his book right here, Learn to Read Ancient Sumerian. It's real dusty because it was in my garage and I was working on some stuff out there, but I find that I'm interested in ancient Sumerian. But anyway, let's see. The one you held up. Okay. Kiara loves Dr. Falk's book. Dr. Falk, which book of Joshua Berman's are you talking about? Maybe you or Kiara can help me out with that. But on this translation thing, hopefully one day I can afford Logos Bible software. That would be really nice. But this, as I showed earlier, eSword is a really good tool for things like this, because you can go to the actual word and it'll tell you the translations that are used. You can use Strong's, Thayer, Smith. Of course, concordances are not always great, but you can have commentaries by a lot of, like, F.B. Meyer and some of these. You also have cross references, and then you have the comparables, right, where you can compare the different versions. I'm not, this isn't sponsored, obviously, but there's a free thing here. And then there's a lot of like really good reference books and stuff. You can get the church fathers and a lot of other creeds of Christendom, history of Christian church, institutes, Christian religion by John Calvin, just a lot of interesting things. The Wars of the Jews, Flavius Josephus, Bible illustrations. Some of these you have to purchase down here, but a lot of those are like illustrated or like more newer content, I guess. But yeah, this can definitely be a good tool for helping a beginner on this. But Berman blows Baden out of the water. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out then, because I'm really interested right now in the hypothesis. I do think that just from The books that I have read that touch on the topic, and from the book I'm reading now, Joe Ben, which has been suggested by a lot of people, I think that it's put a lot in a lot of ways that I hear people put it in. Do you believe in the documentary hypothesis, or do you believe Moses wrote everything in the Pentateuch? And I don't think that way, right? I think we all know that there are passages like Moses' death that he didn't write. I think there are passages like where it says, he wrote that on the other side of the Jordan, where it's like, well, if they're saying he wrote that on the other side of the Jordan, obviously the writer isn't him. And so also Dr. John Walton, he was on and he spoke about it a little bit. He basically was talking about how authorship works in the actually I got his other book, The Lost World of the Torah, in which he kind of goes into a lot of the ancient context with the legal traditions and the suzerain vassal treaties and things like that, and how they relate. But when we're talking about a lot of these complex topics and stuff, it really just doesn't stack up to scholarship like this.
And what if I could prove this to you through a thought experiment alone? Let me explain. Suppose you're God at the beginning of creation. Before anything exists, God means nothing. In the time before time, he could only be consciousness. And consciousness doesn't create things, only imagines them. But to a consciousness at the beginning of time, there is no discernment between your imagination and reality. Because there's nothing there yet, you are that reality. At the beginning of time, the only thing that exists is you. So at the beginning of time, the universe realized that nothing existed, and it was that nothing. That God or consciousness or universe or everything was that nothing at the beginning of time. So the only thing that could have happened at the beginning of time was the acknowledgement between what exists and what does not. What if I told you the first line of the Bible should really be something more like, in the beginning, there was a discernment made between what exists and what does not.
I'm so sorry for this guy. I really do. I am really sorry about this guy. Don't sue me, but just keep in mind, Dr. Falk, who you see in the comments there, Egyptologist, great scholar, guy that you're, top of the line. Like, this guy knows a lot. He's very smart. Okay, started a YouTube channel. I think he's up to what, 3,000, 4,000, something like that now, right? This guy, okay, with definitely the worst translation skills I've ever seen, okay?
It's non-existence. So we're left with this.
I'm sorry. I keep going back to that. This guy has like 120 something thousand followers on TikTok and over 1 million likes on his videos. Okay. And there are some that, like, I didn't even go into all of them. Like, there are some others that are pretty. Hold on a second. I'm just going to pull up another random one. Okay. I hate to be judging this guy like this.
This is an excellent point, and you're right. I'm not a Hebrew scholar. If you're not caught up on my series, I've been translating the Bible into something much deeper. I claim that this has been misinterpreted and should really read something more like this. And I made that claim through an interpretation of the old Hebrew texts. But what if I told you could come to the same conclusion without doing any translations or interpretations, but from looking within? Let's do a thought experiment.
I love this guy, how he's always got, like, he'll always have like his glasses on and pull them down, like, follow me down the rabbit hole, or like, it says this, but I'm a contrarian, right? And then he's always got like a lava lamp or something in the background.
Shall we? Let's pretend you're God at the beginning of existence. What is the first thing you are going to put into existence? The stars, planets, the heavens, earth? No, you can't put any of that into existence before you put into existence itself. How can anything physical exist before you put the framework of reality into place first? And if you are God, everything already exists within your imagination. You don't create them, you simply discern them. So in the beginning, the first thing that could have happened was a discernment made between existence and non-existence.
Wow. I mean, just wisdom. Facts on facts on facts. There's a lot there, folks. And yeah, I'm just gonna probably have to leave you with that. I mean, I have to agree with the chat though, for sure. But yeah, I'm gonna try and have a lot more content coming up soon. We're kind of getting used to having a newborn baby in the house. You know, I also have a 10-year-old, so I'm getting back used to not getting a whole lot of sleep, and then the times that I do have available, I'm working on the house and doing different things. So I'm gonna have some more time coming up soon. I'm gonna have Inspiring Philosophy on probably in the fall. Dr. David Falk, I've been trying to have him back on, but I've been busy. I definitely want to have him on soon. I'm gonna have to reschedule with Dr. Liz Jackson as well, because I definitely want to talk to Dr. Jackson about epistemology, faith, and a few other topics. Yeah, and maybe next time David comes on, I'd like to hear maybe more about his story, about him and Kiara, because you know, my wife is, it can be interesting sometimes. My wife tries to be as supportive as she can, you know, but then sometimes she's like, you know, you can't be up there all night, like in the office. And you know, I'll be down in the living room, you know, while the baby's asleep. And I'm like reading and like bookmarking and stuff. And my wife's just like, let's watch a movie or something. And I'm like really wanting to finish some books that I haven't finished. And, you know, or she'll be like, you're always in the garage or doing different things. You know, we need to spend time with the baby. And I'm like, the baby's asleep. I'm not going to spend 4 hours just right here, like sitting and watching him sleep, you know. But at the same time, she's right. You know, I need to be there. And so anyway, I'm sure Kiara has been very supportive of your career. And yeah, that might be something good to hear about in the future. Wisdom filmed in the back of Shaggy's Mr. Yeah, this is just to go ahead and wrap it up and summarize. Go ahead and summarize this stream. All this wisdom was definitely filmed in the back of Shaggy's Mystery Machine. And let's see, I'm gonna play you guys out with another video. I'll have to find it here. In the last few months, though, last 2 months, I should say, I've been actually giving sermons at my church. So that's been different. I recorded a couple of them, so I'm going to post them online. One's about apologetics. That was my first sermon. It was on apologetics, about how, like, I don't know, sometimes I just feel like Christians have a bad approach. And I really hate that sometimes we don't reach people because of that approach. And so it's just kind of about how to approach people who disagree with you. And like one of the main points I make is, or like one of the points I make is, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, right? You don't always have to be like, oh no, well, when it says he hovered over the face of the deep, it meant that he transcended over non-existence or whatever. What did he say again? Hold on a second.
Like an abstraction of consciousness. Seventh's also abstract but meaning spirit. The eighth is simply God or gods. Ninth is also contextually synonymous with transcended. Lastly, the 10th is waters, for reasons explained in other videos as non-existence.
Right, so he transcended over the non-existence. That's right. Which is brilliant, actually, if you really think about it. Yeah. Okay. So last one I'm going to share here. Let's see, I think I might have one more video. Is this? Oh yeah. So with all of that, he's going to tell us about, I think, 1 Corinthians, I believe it was. And then thank you guys for coming by.
Corinthians 2:9 referring to heaven. Kind of. Let me explain. This verse is really saying two things. The first is that the human mind and senses are ill-equipped to handle the true nature of the divine. See, our mind and senses are only equipped to handle the physical world. The physical world being all that in existence which has form. So the verse is saying that there is something transcendental to the world of form, but only experientiable, not through the mind nor the senses. Which leads me to the second point this verse is making, which is that the way to access this experience is through love of God. We'll get into what love or even God in this context means another time. This question is about heaven. As discussed in my last few videos, we talked about how heaven literally translates to that which has no form. So yes, Corinthians 2:9 is referring to the same thing, it's just that it's also saying that it's inconceivable. Now, inconceivability doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it just means that it's outside of the realm of logic.
Okay.
Referring to the same thing, it's just that it's also saying that it's inconceivable. So yes, Corinthians 2:9 is referring to the same thing, it's just that it's also saying that it's inconceivable. Now, inconceivability doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it just means that it's outside of the realm of logic.
This is so crazy because he says that it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, speaking of heaven, but didn't he say that heaven didn't exist?
And what if I could prove this to you through, like, in the beginning, there was a discernment made between what exists and what does not. And what if I could
Heaven means not exist, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I just had a random stream, so I randomly popped in and didn't have much planned really, but hopefully you enjoyed this. Allegorical method of interpretation, very Gnostic. Yes, and I hope to get Dr. David Falk's book on Gnosticism, by the way, but it's last time I checked it was like $70 or $80, so I paid like $50 for the Joe Banton's book, so I guess I could probably try and scrape together the money. I don't have Patreon, or I never beg for anything, so I maybe I should. I thought about that the other day. Somebody was talking about Patreon. They're like, do you not have one? And I'm like, I don't remember if I set one up or not. I might have, but never asked for money. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes apologetics, like some people can go a little overboard with it, like but then there are people like Dr. Falk that do it the right way. They're like, hey, look, I'm gonna, if you guys are interested, I'd love to write this book and I'd love to do all this research, but I need some help funding it. And I thought about that with my books. I'm like, you know what? I buy books for, if you look at the amount of books that I bought over the last like 6 months, I mean, hundreds of dollars worth of books. I'm like, well, that's something to think about for the future. But anyway, I got a really cool thing coming up on Vosh. Yes, the YouTuber Vosh, and like a, I don't know, an audit kind of thing, debate analysis maybe, and a few others. So definitely check it out. And if you guys haven't hit the notification bell, do that, because it will not alert you unless you do. So really good seeing you guys, and thanks for stopping by.